Godzilla versus the X-Men. Sunfire spins through the air, trying to avoid a blast of Godzilla's atomic breath. But the King of Monsters is too powerful, and the force of the blast knocks Sunfire from the sky, sending him tumbling into the ocean below. Sunfire breaks the surface and watches as Godzilla returns his sight to his target, a Suganai robotics facility. Godzilla takes a deep breath and hits the facility with another blast of atomic fire before turning and disappearing beneath the ocean's surface. Later, Professor Charles Xavier sits in his school for higher learning in Westchester, New York, watching footage of the attack. His hover chair spins and he looks back to the meeting table. Holographic images of Sunfire, Henry Gyrick, and Mr. Kaneda of the Suganai Robotics Corporation. Thank you for granting me this audience, Mr. Kaneda. And I assure you, Sunfire was right to recommend my assistance, Xavier notes. But Mr. Kaneda shakes his head, explaining that they need to hit Godzilla with large weapons, that the monster will only understand force. It has been tried repeatedly, and it has failed, Sunfire points out. But Xavier ponders this for a moment, pointing out that Godzilla's actions have been specific and consistent, which speaks to reasoned motivations, Xavier explains, pointing out that they may be able to reason with Godzilla because of this. But should peaceful methods not succeed, the preferences of Mr. Kaneda can also be served, Xavier points out. Meanwhile, below the school, the X-Men run through a battle simulation within the Danger Room, testing out their powers against the physical parameters of Godzilla. Cyclops fires an optic blast, noting that it barely scratches the anticipated density of Godzilla's hide. Storm and Jean continue to deal with Godzilla's atomic fire, while Wolverine and Beast work on dealing with the creature's tail. Finally, the simulation ends, and Xavier hovers into the room. The Commission of Superhuman Activities has accepted our assistance. Dr. Valerie Cooper and Henry Gyrick are drafting a formal arrangement with the Japanese government, Xavier tells his team, explaining that he wants a meeting of the minds with the creature. But we should be prepared to confront Godzilla on its terms, Xavier finishes. The team gathers up, and Cyclops nods at the idea. That's easier said than done when your opponent is over 100 meters tall, he points out. Xavier smiles at them. I imagine it is fortuitous then that we are working on getting taller, Xavier points out. Meanwhile, at that exact moment, Remy LeBeau, also known as Gambit, is sneaking into the CSA storage depot in Boulder, Colorado. He slips through the vents, a flashlight clutched between his teeth. Why can't it ever be in the first room I break into? Gambit grumbles to Beast over the comms. He finally finds the vent he needs to drop through. After clipping his cable to the vents, he lowers himself into the room. Finally, he lands in front of his target. His flashlight plays over the stasis chamber of the Super Adaptoid. Getting to the thing is gonna be easier than getting the thing out, Gambit notes as he sees the size of the Adaptoid. But Gambit smiles and pats his pocket, pulling out a vial of red liquid. The getting out does get easier when you have a few PIM particles handy, Gambit notes. Days later, Godzilla breaks the surface of the ocean in Ise Bay, Japan. He turns his gaze upon another Suganai manufacturing facility. Godzilla glares at the facility. They never stop hunting and hounding Godzilla. They threaten him and his kind, threaten his safety. They always escalate, and Godzilla obliterates. 2 days later, a Trask ship is docking at the facility. Far overhead, Beast brings the Blackbird around for another pass, while the rest of the X-Men are getting ready in the jet's hold. Really wish we just took it to Godzilla without all of this, Gambit notes, looking at the mind link devices that they're all hooked into. But Cyclops shakes his head as he pulls on his own mind link mask. We lack the time to train for fighting at giant size, Remy. Mind links, the X-Men are used to, Scott reminds him. The team gathers around Charles as he explains that whatever is on the Trask ship has caused great turmoil within Godzilla. I cannot read the creature's mind, but its rage is palpable. We will have to work together to defeat the creature. Below them, Godzilla breaks through the water's surface with a roar of anger. A great tidal wave washes over the Trask container ship, and all the workers yell in fear. But the super adaptoid drops down, altering to share the powers of the X-Men. Lightning cracks in the air, and the wind begins to whip as Storm unleashes a full fury of nature, while the super adaptoid stands ready to engage Godzilla. Let the urge to control your own movements flow through me, Charles reminds his team, using his own powers to calm their thoughts and allow them to meld into one mental being. The super adaptoid grows in size with the aid of Pym particles until it stands head to head with the King of Monsters. But Godzilla does not like being challenged and lets out another roar of anger. The adaptoid fires an optic blast at it, but the energy does little, and it responds with a blast of atomic breath. Xavier reaches out to the creature's mind, realizing that Godzilla has a goal, and they are merely standing in its way. We are not its enemy. We are an obstacle, Xavier says. Suddenly, Beast looks to his instruments, noting that their sensors have detected a massive mechanical object on board the Trask container ship. Danger! They always escalate! It poses a danger! It must be destroyed! Xavier shouts to the others. Suddenly, the ship below them begins to quake. Sunfire has just arrived and buzzes over it. His eyes widen in shock as he sees a massive robotic creature rising up. The Tri-Sentinel Mecha Kaiju, a three-headed robot dragon that is modeled after some of Godzilla's greatest foes. Biolante, Batra, and Fire Rodan. The robotic monster leaps into the air, letting out a digital roar as it fires a burst of fire breath at Godzilla, who roars and meets its attack with atomic breath. The X-Men steer the adaptoid to aid Godzilla, using Storm's powers to throw a tornado at it. Godzilla fires another blast of atomic breath, but the Tri-Sentinel Mecha Kaiju leaps into the air and flies around the blast. The adaptoid suddenly sprouts Wolverine claws and leaps forward. Let's see if some old-fashioned claws to the guts do the trick, Wolverine thinks as they slash the Tri-Sentinel Mecha Kaiju down the middle. But the robot roars and swings its tail, knocking the adaptoid onto the docks and scattering shipping containers. It slams into the adaptoid, trying to bite at its face, but an optic blast keeps it at bay. Godzilla rushes at it from behind, but the Tri-Sentinel Mecha Kaiju's tail suddenly splits and tentacles wrap around the King of Monsters. The adaptoid gets up and grabs the robot from behind, holding it steady. Finally, Godzilla narrows its eyes at the monster and takes a deep breath, hitting it with a powerful atomic blast that burns its upper torso to ash. And so, another battle ends. But Godzilla isn't done. It turns its gaze to the shipping yard, where it can see Mr. Kaneto hiding. It knows that Suganai Robotics is its enemy. But the X-Men land and charge forward. Xavier reaches out with his mind, sensing why Mr. Kaneto is so hell-bent on fighting against Godzilla. His father was a part of the Japanese Defense Force in 1955, and died when Godzilla was fighting against the monster known as Anguirus. Since that day, Mr. Kaneto has hated the Kaiju and dedicated his life to stopping them. Xavier turns his gaze upon the Japanese businessman. Godzilla did not deserve your misguided hate, Kaneto, but Kaneto just glares. "You side with a monster?" he demands. Xavier nods his head and looks back to his team. If there is anything mutants can relate to, it is the loneliness of protecting a world that fears and hates us. Godzilla stares at the group of heroes for a moment. Finally, he turns away and stomps back out into the ocean, confident that the mutants can be trusted to deter the humans who can't be. Finally, Mr. Kaneto is left alone in the destruction that was once his facility. But this destruction was caused not by Godzilla, but by the monster that he created. He stares down into a puddle of water and stares at his own reflection, reflecting in turn on his own life. And that was the complete story for Godzilla vs. X-Men by Fabian Nicieza, another one-shot in the Godzilla vs. Marvel series, which you can watch more of in the playlist that I will link in the description below. But what did you think about today's video? Let me know in the comments below. And like and subscribe for videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm Dan with Comicstorian, and we will see you next time. Rest in peace, Benny.